Hi, this is Sam Stone with CBR here at New York Comic Con 2022 with Felicia Day, the host of the official Lord of the Rings of Power podcast, available now on Amazon Music. Felicia, thanks for taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you for having me.
What was your gateway into the wide, wide world of Tolkien?
I mean, I think it's everybody's gateway, which is The Hobbit. Around 10 or 11, your parents start to read it to you, then you transition to reading yourself, then you're like, where are the girls in this? Then I go to Lord of the Rings later, and of course the movies, that was... And, before doing this podcast, that was kind of my last touchstone, the movies. So it's been a while, and so being able to dive back into this world it is the origin of all fantasy almost. I mean, it is the basis for all the fantasy worlds I love. It's just really been a treat.
Well, in doing something like The Guild or doing something like Dragon Age, when you're bringing these high fantasy characters to life, like what are your Tolkien touchstones? Like, hey, I'm going to be an elf or I'm going to be an assassin. Like, what are the kind of reference points that you have? I
mean, Arondir from the show, The Rings of Power, is the person I'm vicariously living through because I always play a wood elf, in whatever video game. I'm always the sylvan elf, green, earth powers. A little bit of fire is always nice too. But no, I mean, really, obviously Tolkien was inspired by folklore, and he took a lot from Celtic and Norse mythology and things like that. But he put it in a unified world that everybody is derivative of. I mean, every single big fantasy tome owes its roots to Tolkien. And so seeing the show bring this kind of era that is a little more sketched out to life is such a treat because it's connective tissue in a very creative way that delights me and makes me want to go back to the original source material even more.
Well, with that being said, so it's the Second Age. It's rich. It's the Silmarillion.
Yeah. Well, yeah, kind of some of it. Yeah.
Sure. What were the elements of the Rings of Power, just the lore that you were really excited about to get to see, be it Numenor or be any the Southlands, any of that? I
mean, all of it. Actually, Numenor was probably the least that I knew about because it is kind of buried in the appendices, and I hadn't read a lot of the extended text up until now, knowing a lot about it. I mean, you kind of had this line, oh, it was the Atlantis of the Tolkien universe, but there is a lot of rich lore there, but you kind of have to dig a little bit deeper. For me, it's just seeing, in episode 4, there's a Palantir, and of course at the end of 6, there's the origin of Mordor, and the Harfoots who are the sort of proto-hobbits. Seeing those in a not, sometimes prequels can be, oh, I know what's going to happen. But the great thing is I kind of know what's happening, don't know what's going to happen, but I do know, but then all the story and the characters and the emotion, I don't know, because that's really what is more missing in the Second Age. And I know somebody's doing a comment right now about how that's not true. I'm generalizing, okay? Be quiet.
We see you in the comments.
I see you and I still love you, okay? Hugs.
When you're doing something like this, did you had mentioned that the films were your last major touchstone. Did you just bore down on the Silmarillion and the appendices to prep for this podcast?
I mean, I was actually rereading The Lord of the Rings to prep for the show just as a fan because I was like, this is an opportunity. And my daughter is 5, and so I know she's borderline, but I'm like, if I found maybe an illustrated Hobbit, I could start reading it to her because she loves mythology, she loves the Norse gods, so I'm definitely steeping her in the things I love a lot. She loves fantasy and all that stuff. So I was like, I think it might be time. I'm going to read The Lord of the Rings, then get to The Hobbit and have this show. And then I got the call to do the podcast, which I was like, this is fate. So I was already halfway through it. But of course, yes, I dove back into Silmarillion, The Unfinished Tales, Luthien Baron, Fallen Gondor, all of them. And some of them I hadn't read before, some of the pre ones. And The Unfinished Tales, my goodness, there's so much amazing stuff in there. And they can't use that in the show itself. So really, they're basing the show lore on the annotations in The Lord of the Rings, which is a lot more sketched out. I mean, but the great thing is, once you watch the show and then hopefully listen to the podcast, or at the very least, rewatch the show, you will see so many Easter eggs to so many different references in the Tolkien world, because truly J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay, the showrunners, they love Tolkien. I mean, it's almost a reverential love for this world, and they're trying to shape it in a way that fits television and yet retain and acknowledge that there is a wider world here that we need to honor in a deeper way.
Speaking of the showrunners, you kick off this thing speaking to JD and Patrick about the show.
Yeah.
I always love it when storytellers talk to other storytellers, especially if they have a common love in a certain source material. how was it speaking with them and finding that bond and their own unique take on this world?
I mean, well, first of all, we have a little bit of them in every episode. So we have an episode for each of the episodes of the show. So there's 8 episodes of the podcast. We interview some of the actors, Bear McCreary, the composer, Charlotte Brandstrom, the director of 6 and 7, which are epic episodes. And then the last episode, yes, I got to break down the finale with the showrunners themselves for a whole hour. And I have to tell you, these guys, they know their stuff. They almost are like, I feel so responsible, They really... They have this allegiance to the world of Tolkien. They really want to do it right, and they're so meticulous. And that's what I really, speaking with them, getting to know them as people, as storytellers, it's really wonderful, the depth of their knowledge and how dedicated they are. I mean, I could see them, they're going to be like Obama going into his first term and then coming out. You know how great he was? That's how they're going to be after the 5th season of the show. I know it, because they are working so hard, but they love their work, and it really shows.
Sí se puede. When in talking to the cast, like Morpeth Clark or Ismail or any of those guys, like how is it getting their perspective of being the boots on the ground in New Zealand or soon to be the UK as they bring Middle Earth and the Second Age to life?
Every single one of the actors was such a pleasure. I mean, all these actors they've worked a lot, and they're incredible stage actors. And a lot of them have done movies and TV, but of course, how can you do something on this scale? It's new. And so as an audience member, they're defining themselves for me as the character. And getting to know their journeys and like their audition stories. Sofia Nomete has this incredible story about almost giving birth while she's auditioning. Like, there are so many wonderful stories. And Ismail, not a stunt performer necessarily. I was like, but he looks like a professional stunt person. He took it so seriously. He was training like hours a day, and just the dedication. It's really wonderful. One thing, I got to interview Bear McCreary, and it made me. I mean, I didn't realize this while I'm watching the show, but the soundtrack is another character in this, and it's so beautifully done. The themes, and they fit so wonderfully. Yeah, it was, every episode made me go and watch another episode again and see so many things I didn't see the first time.
What was the most burning question that you really wanted to ask? I guess without going into spoilers for maybe the season finale.
I mean, I will say that I got a Easter egg out of I tried to hit Easter eggs every single episode, and I asked them about that. But in episode, I think it's in the longer interview, I get an Easter egg that I was so excited about. I'm not sure. I'm sure somebody on the internet has either supposed it or guessed it, but there is an object that is not even acknowledged in the show that they admit that is the object, and it is a canon object. And I was like, wait, what? What? So I literally gasped out loud when they revealed it. So listen to the 8th episode to get that little Easter egg.
This just the ultimate macro question. I love asking it, but what is the secret sauce in the Rings of Power that makes it so quintessentially Lord of the Rings and an extension of Tolkien?
I think these showrunners are driven by theme a lot, and the theme of good and evil and friendship overcoming odds that are monumental, and the possibility of everyone becoming evil or good. This is the black and white world, and this is the basis of all of what we're retconning a lot now. Like The Boys, like subverts, superheroes, right? But this is like going back to classic Superman, right? And I feel that honor and reverence and themes in the characters, they're really thinking about the totality of the Tolkien world. And when they invent a character, or they bring in something that's a little non-canon, or if they have to squish something timeline-wise to get everything to work in a 8-hour format, they really are thinking thematically. And I think that's what really gives it the heft. It's like picking up one of those big books. It's rich and dense, and it's worth rereading and worth rewatching. And hopefully the podcast encourages people to do that.
Sure. And to the flip side of that, what is it that makes the Rings of Power unique from the Ralph Bakshi or the Peter Jackson?
That's his name, yeah.
Yeah, I was almost like Phil Jackson, the coach of the LA Lakers.
Yeah.
No, it's Peter. Sorry. But yeah, what is it about Rings of Power that is unique to the world of Tolkien?
I mean, I think we're delving into. I mean, if you read the books, the lore of the elves is so rich. I mean, Silmarillion is just all about elves. Like the first age is so complicated, and yes, on a third read now, I'm like, oh yeah, I got it, and I want to see that brought to life really too. But yeah, it really is delving into the elves, I mean, and that lore, I think that's really, we had some elves, but really it was very Hobbit oriented, the Lord of the Rings. We had humans and things like that, but that deeper elf lore that is the underlying, like that's what's wonderful. Galadriel, she is kind of a blank slate in the Second Age, and even Christopher Tolkien has said that, and being able to fill in that gap it feels true to her character because she set out to establish her own land as a leader. That's why she left Valinor. So knowing that from the First Age and then coming to where we know her from the Third Age, leaving, having what is the adolescence of this character who's thousands of years old and so incredibly important and inspirational, especially to me as a woman reading those. Like that's who I glommed onto because there are not a lot of female characters in the Lord of the Rings or the Hobbit. So, I think that really is the heart of it, and seeing her journey and where she's going to go is very exciting.
When you were breaking this down episode by episode, what do those notes look like? How extensive?
There's a lot.
Do you have a board who is Sauron? It's got all the lines of.
Oh yeah, a little murder board.
Yeah,
I have one of those for everything. Just even my grocery store, list is have murder board. Yeah, no, there's, and I do, there are, it's a big team that does this podcast, but I do all my research. I have my favorites for the episodes. I always try, because the podcast is not, if you're a hardcore Tolkien fan, I'm not going to teach you anything, right? But you're going to come to learn about the craftsman and what is specific of the show, right? And maybe my opinions about a couple things. If you are a newbie to the world, I want to be able to drop some knowledge, everything I've done, the guild, tabletop, D&D, Magic the Gathering, all the shows that I've produced or created or helped to create have been hoping to unlock a door for someone to get into something they love, right? And so my aim was with this, that's who I wanted to aim for. So I want somebody to watch the show, listen to the podcast, maybe rewatch the show, and then maybe be like, Felicia told me a little bit about Palantirs. Let me go read up on that, or let me read that story that has that in there. Oh, who is Luthien? Let me go read that one. And so, there is such rich, and let me then watch the show again and see how all those layers are already put there, and you wouldn't notice it if you just did it on a casual viewing.
In terms of tidbits of information, what were some of the things where you just wanted to be hold up, this is important, you need to know this for the show? What were some of the big nuggets you were ready to unpack?
I mean, the good thing about the show is that, and I talked about this with the showrunners, it's really hard to summarize the whole First Age. And they said they wrote it hundreds of times, trying to get that opening of Galadriel from Valinor going to where we are now. And so that's what I feel the show does a very good job of getting people who don't know Tolkien to get into the world. And maybe it's very dense, but that's why another rewatch really helps. And I think that's the problem. People hate video game adaptations for good reasons. You're trying to please somebody who knows 200 hours of a world, and yet you need somebody who doesn't know anything about it to want to watch it. And it's really hard. And then you have people protecting their IP, but also people who want to be I can't get people lost. So it's a really hard line to adapt these big iconic IP. And that's what I feel the Rings of Power does very well. You can't please everybody, but you can, I think they do satisfy a lot of factions of knowledge from A to Z, and that's what I enjoy about it.
I think we got time for one more. What else do you want to tease about the official The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power podcast on Amazon Music?
Wow, what do I want to tease? I mean, I will just say that the Easter eggs, some of them that they can confirm for me are very, very cool. And you'll know the one because I probably squeal really loud in episode 8. So I will say definitely listen to that one, because not only is the insight into these creators who's going to be with you for years with the show, just getting to know them and the fact they were on a debate team together in high school, it just humanizes the people who make this the most epic TV show I think we've seen in a long time and have ever seen.
And this is Sam Stone with CBR here at New York Comic Con 2022 with Felicia Day to talk all things the official The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power podcast. Available, all 8 episodes available October 14th on Amazon Music. Felicia, thanks for taking the time.
Thank you very much, Sam. Bye.